So I recently had a poll on YouTube. I didn't even know you could do one until recently, but I did one anyway, and it was between another model swap video or a cut content video. Specifically on the cut content for Chapter 4, to do with the cooking sequence, which has been talked about publicly by Neil Druckmann in an interview with, I want to say, Rolling Stone, not that long after the game came out. And I have the quote here actually. He said, there used to be a cooking sequence where you were actually mixing in ingredients. You could make the food too spicy and they would have different dialogue depending on how spicy you made it. That got cut. And he's right, it did get cut. In the final game, which we have here, as you can see, there's just the two bowls of food that you pick up. And that's it. It's already pre-made. The sauce and the pasta is already there. But the utensils from when you still had to do the cooking sequence was actually just left in the game. And it is these 4 objects. It is the 2 different pots, the wooden spoon, and the spice rack. These were all essential. These were what you were going to use for the cooking sequence. And I noticed this a little while ago, is that if you go inside the pot at the back, it actually has pasta inside it already. They just left it there because obviously you can't see it with the lid on it. So there's pasta in there. Now these 2 pots had 2 different functions. The one at the back was your pasta pot. The one at the front was your sauce pot. And you could add spices to the sauce. You could have a little taste test. You could add spice either slow or fast, depending on what you wanted to pick. And there's little bits of dialogue I was able to pull out of, actually it was a script from the multiplayer beta. It was scrapped in the final game, but they left the early script for it in the beta, which I unfortunately can't restore into the final game. It's just not compatible. Otherwise I would actually show Nathan Drake doing this, but I can talk about the stuff that's in that script. There's some little pieces of dialogue as well, little text dialogue that was left in there, which goes along with this. And so yes, you get the ability to stir the sauce. You can add spices, depending on what Nate talks about it. Once you had appropriately spiced your sauce and stirred it, you could combine the 2 pots together, and then it would need stirred again, and you could choose to either stir it fast or slow. And once you had done this, that was essentially your main cooking segment over with, and you could totally fuck up. Like Neil Druckmann said, you could completely ruin the cooking. And there were 2 different bits of dialogue the script mentions that Nate would say depending on how well you did. The first was, if you did bad, he would say not quite al dente, and if you did good, he would say cooked to perfection. Whether there was other variants, I don't know, but these are the 2 that it mentions. And then once that was done, you would then put it into the bowls like such. So in the final game it just skips right to the end. It's already pre-made. And yeah, the script doesn't mention the vegetables. I think that's just something they added. But yeah, I mean, if we go up to the spice rack, you can actually read the spices that's on it. I think they all say the same thing, but they actually have dialogue written on them. And just to show that these 4 are actually interactable objects, the game, Naughty Dog games refer to models as actors. So, for example, Nathan Drake is a actor in the game, but also that wooden spoon is an actor. That's just what they refer to them as. And if I go into the debug menu and I hit reset actors, you can see all 4 of those objects disappear. Now, of course, if they weren't intended to be interactable, why would they be separate objects? You can see that the knife block, the toaster, all this stuff still stays there because that is baked into the map file. But those 4 objects are actually separate, so they were to be used, of course. So that's the main thing. You would have cooked your food like such, and then you would have been able to serve it and done that. Would have just been a little bit extra. Probably for the best they removed it, because you already have the goofiness, I think, with the Crash Bandicoot sequence. Which, about that, while I'm on the topic of Chapter 4, since I probably won't have another opportunity to talk about this, there is a alternate version of this chapter before they had made the Crash Bandicoot sequence, or before they decided on making it. And the knowledge of this alternate sequence comes from a file in the game which was used, I believe, for when people were playtesting it. Before the cutscenes were made, there were these little kind of story blurbs that existed so that you would understand what had happened in the story up until that point, and what had happened in a cutscene. And there was one for Chapter 4 that, since this was made before they decided on Crash Bandicoot, played out a little bit differently, and I'm going to read this little blurb to you right now. So it says here, Nate returns home to find his wife Elena unpacking takeout. They sit down for dinner and discuss their day. Elena talks about the various writing projects she's juggling. Nate about the Malaysia job Jameson offered him. Elena encourages Nate to take the job, but Drake, feeling cornered and conflicted, abruptly shoves the food aside and whisks Elena away from the table. He and Elena then dance around their modest home. They've both made compromises, but they're happy together. So that is your little kind of alternate take without the Crash Bandicoot involvement. They dance, apparently. Whether that would have been interactable, I doubt it. But there's one or two other alternate scenes or additional scenes that are talked about in these little story blurbs for the rest of the game that I will go into at some point in the future, but that's your additional piece for the video. And yeah, I wish I could actually have Nathan Drake doing this stuff in the game to show you. I think that's the reason I held off on making this video for so long, is because I just struggled with trying to get those scripts compatible with the final game, but it's just not happening. If I'm able to do it in the future, I'll make a new video about it. But until then, at least you know the main layout. And yeah, that is your Uncharted 4 cut cooking sequence. I hope you learned something new.